So the reason why I want to walk you through the scoring guide is that I feel like really in your 9th and 10th grade year, you've been given a rubric that has standards on it, but never really told what those standards mean or how to move through the rubric, meaning how do you truly improve, right? So what I'm going to walk you through today is our scoring guide. Now, I'm going to walk you through the scoring guide that is for rhetorical analysis, this specific rhetorical analysis. Through all the rhetorical analysis, they're all going to be they're all going to be the same except for just take out Barry and put in whomever we're talking about, right? The good thing about our scoring rubrics for all 3 of our essays, for the synthesis, for the rhetorical analysis, and for the argument, is they're all scored the same language is on it for the most part, the same categories are on it for the most part. So once you learn one, you know how to move through the others. When we get to argument, I'll show you what a true argument scoring guide looks like, and you'll see some familiarities in this, but we have to begin with somewhere. So I'm going to start with this. So this is, out of focus, this is the one page, the full page that you have in front of you. Notice these are yellow pages, so where do I want them to go?
Yellow pages.
With your yellow pages. So this is a guide to holistic scoring, and this is what we give our teachers at NIMSY when we go and do a mock reading with them, okay? So we walk them through how to holistically score. Holistically score means I'm looking at the entirety of the paper and I'm not nitpicking for things. I'm looking at the content that is delivered, how it's delivered, and I'm giving it one score. So it's not graded 85, 95, 87, 83 for whatever points you get taken off, okay? Holistic means I'm looking at the entire thing. So there's a few points on here that I want to point out to you. Point number 1, it says once you've internalized the scoring guide, which I have over the last few years, read for an impression of the whole paper and score immediately. It says do not read, but it should say do not reread or analyze. So when I read your paper, it should take me about 45 seconds to a minute to read your paper in its entirety from beginning to end. Okay? I cannot reread your paper. I have to just read it once and get the understanding. So you understand when I tell you all the fluffiness is distracting. You need to be clear and concise because your essay gets a one pass over. Okay? That's the reason why. Point number 2, it says we're reading the entire paper from the beginning to the end. So sometimes most of the time we say your introduction is a precursor of what you're going to get. So immediately from your introduction, I say upper half, lower half, right? And every time I read a paragraph, I say upper half, lower half. So sometimes your introduction is terrible and you get better as you go. Sometimes your introduction is amazing and it falls apart after that, okay? So that's why we have to read it from beginning to end. Point number 3 I think is really important, and I'm not sure if y'all have really kind of ever been told this or really seen. So we read supportively, meaning I look for the things that you do well. I do not count you down for the things that you do not do well. So I basically look past those things, if that makes sense, right? So everybody starts at a 0, and then for everything that you do well, I'm moving you up the scoring rubric, okay? Most of the things that you get, everybody starts at 100 and then points are counted off, right? So you've seen those rubrics before where you get like 5 points for MLA, 4 points for a thesis, 3 points for this, 2 points for that, right? That's nonsense. That takes too much of my time. I do too much math, right? So I look at you holistically, but I score you up for the things that you do well. Basically, if you're doing something poorly, I just ignore that it's even there, okay? Which for most of us is a really good thing. Point number 6 I think is interesting. Do not judge a paper by its length. Some short papers are good. Some long papers are poor. Like I've seen 4-page essays that are no better than a 2 on a scale of 1 to 9 because it's just a whole bunch of fluff. All right. I like number 9, and a reader that I had training with one time said that she doesn't call them ranges, she calls them houses. So there are many papers in a house of a 6, meaning that not all 6s are going to look the same. There's going to be some high 6s, there are going to be some mid 6s, and some very low 6s. This is why I score you want a plus or minus, because you are in that house, right? And I'll show you, sometimes if you're in the high house of the 6, you just need to do one more thing better to get to that 7, okay? But you're not quite the 7 yet. So not all 5s will look the same, not all 4s will look the same. You have to grade them based on the rubric that we'll walk through after this. Number 11, star it. Remember that an unfinished but developed paper should not be penalized for lacking a conclusion, okay? So notice that if you don't get all the way through, you're not going to be penalized, but here's what I encourage you to do. This is why I told you to put a star by it. If you are running out of time, finish whatever sentence you're on and at least give me a one-sentence conclusion. Because what that shows is that you have at least concluded your second body paragraph of thought and are moving into your conclusion. Even if it's a terrible one-sentence summary of like your thesis statement, right? Just do it. Just put it in there just so that it can be seen as being completed. Right there for now. Okay, so that's basically some of the main guidelines, right?
You want me to take the bin back though?
That's, of course you did. I think I have a box back there or a crate back there somewhere. There might be an empty crate somewhere. So that's holistic scoring. So you're going to keep this out, all right, so that you can use this for later when you guys score. So next quarter, you guys are going to do your own table reads, meaning you're going to write an essay. The second day, we're going to do scoring, where we look at samples and we break down the samples and see what like a high, a medium, and a low look like. And then I'm going to put you into tables and you're going to score your own essays. Okay, meaning you are going to read it and everybody else is going to read the essay, and then you're going to come to a conclusion of what that essay is scored, right? And you have to do it based off of this. My theory is if you can score accurately, then you know how to write accurately, right? If you don't know what a 6 looks like and you can't tell a 6 from a 3, then we have a problem, right? If you can't tell the difference between a passing essay and a failing essay, then you don't know what to put in your own essay. Does that make sense? So we do a lot of table reads where we all score together. It's very stressful. And then I grade you on how accurately you score. So you grade them, I grade you. Right? So in the beginning, you'll grade something a 7 and I'll grade it a 3. It will be that far apart. But by spring break, you'll be scoring right on task with me. Okay? All right, so now take out the scoring guide. 100. Is that all she gave you? Tell her I need more. Tell her I told her I need 100.
Okay.
Yeah.
She doesn't know she has 100.
Well, I asked for 100. I need 100. I mean, come on, people. Okay, so here's what our scoring rubric looks like. So a couple of things on the top. This is all the same up top. The score should reflect a judgment of the essay's quality as a whole. Remember that students had only 40 minutes to read and write. Therefore, the essay is not a finished product and should not be judged based on standards that are appropriate for an out-of-class assignment. Evaluate the essay as a draft, making certain to reward students for what they do well. All essays, even those scored 8 or 9, may contain occasional flaws in analysis, prose style, or mechanics. Such features should enter into the holistic evaluation of an essay's overall quality. In no case may an essay with many distracting errors in grammar and mechanics be scored higher than a 2. Listen, we're never going to be in that range of having so many errors in grammar and mechanics that we're going to get a 2. Okay, that is really few and far between for us, for real. So that is, I've read essays that contain like 3 periods. And I'm literally trying to figure out where the beginning of a thought and the end of a thought is. Okay, that's going to get in the way of understanding, right? I've read essays that have English words on them. But those English words aren't like constructed together to make any kind of clear thought. But the words like scientific and research and Barry and scientists are in there, so I have to at least give it a score. Okay, we are not at that level. We pray. Okay? Okay. So with that in mind, I'm going to break this down. So here's how I divide my scoring guide, okay? So I'm going to divide between 4 and 5. And between 5 and 6. Okay? So everything from 6 and above is pass. Everything from 4 and below is fail. Then what is a 5? We're just going to put barely. Okay, so what you notice is that the evens all have descriptors, right? So basically the way that I grade your papers, I grade it on the evens, 2, 4, 6, or 8, right? So if you're passing, I'm starting at a 6 or an 8 and I'm going up from there. If you're failing, I'm starting at a 4 and I'm working my way down. Okay, so let's start at the 8. So notice it is effective. So essays earning a score of 8 effectively analyze how Barry uses rhetorical strategies to characterize scientific research. Okay, so this is your level of analysis. Effective is impressive for me. That's kind of what I'm saying is that one. Effective is impressive. Notice also the prose, which is your writing style, demonstrates an ability to control a wide range of elements of effective writing, but is not necessarily flawless. So your prose is your writing style. So I say that's probably your writing style is probably the easiest way to improve your writing. Writing style is your sentence structure, right? Your organization of sentences and your paragraphs and your vocabulary. Those things are the easiest things to improve to bump your score up to the next level. Okay? The analysis part to improve will get better over time, but it probably will still not be stellar in the spring, right? So out of our 3 essays, the rhetorical analysis is and always has been the lowest scoring essay out of the 3 on the exam. Okay? So we have to get to where we are at least at a 6 is our goal. Okay? So let's move up. So if it's an 8, one better than an 8 is a 9. So really a 9 is just an 8 plus one more thing done well. So notice essays of a 9 meet the criteria for an 8 and in addition are especially sophisticated in their explanation or demonstrate impressive control of language. So notice that the 9 is totally an 8. It says the same thing an 8 does, but it says it better. Right? Or a 9 says what the 8 says, but there's a little bit more insight into it. It doesn't have to do both. Now sometimes 9s do both. 9s are more insightful and better written than the 8. Okay? When you read a 9, and from the intro paragraph, you know it's a 9. Okay? Same thing I would say for an 8. But if I'm ever in the question, I'm never in a question of a 9. If I question a 9, then it's an 8 for me. Okay? So when we do our mock exam in the spring, I trade essays with my friend who used to teach here. He works in Lovejoy now, so we trade papers. Okay? So I don't grade your mock exams. He grades your mock exams, and I grade his. Reason why? Because it's a little bit less bias. Right? So after almost a full year of grading essays, I go, God, Cole's always like an 8. So I kind of, thank God, right? Hopefully. So when I go into reading Cole's, I kind of already think, oh, this is going to be a good paper. So I struggle when it's a bad paper, right? So we trade papers because now there's no bias. They don't know anything about you, how much work you've done, how much knowledge you have. If you're top of the class, low class, you don't like not low class, but in the bottom of the class, they don't know where you are. He doesn't know where you are. So it's scored a little bit more evenly, I think. So last year I scored one of his essays for our argument, and I read the introduction, and I stopped and I texted him, and I go, I'm reading a 9. And he was like, who? And I told him, and I said, don't tell me anything about her. And he's like, how much have you read? I said, the introduction. I said, I'll BRB. So then I read the first body paragraph. And I text him, I go, holy crap, totally a 9. BRB. So then I read the second body paragraph, and in all caps, in individual text, O, return. M, return. G, return. 3 different texts, OMG. I'm like, so a 9. And then I sent him a little emojis of an angel, and then a heart, and then like the sun shining through the clouds. Okay, so when you read a 9, there's no question. It's like the heavens open up, the skies part, light shines down on you, the angels come playing their harps, and you're like risen in the clouds. Like that's what happens, right? So 9s are few and far between. 8s are probably pretty close to that. My friend who scored essays this summer for the read scored 3,800 essays, she said, in the week. She scored 1.9 out of 3,800. And that's in across the country. Okay, so when you see a 9, you're like, please let me find a 9, right? And when you do, it's amazing. So notice that it's not that hard to get there if you're at an 8. I can probably get you to a 7, possibly an 8, depending on where you start. I can't get you to the 9. That's from whoever you believe in. Okay? All right, so let's go from effective to adequate. So let's look at 6. Essays earning a score of 6 adequately analyze how Barry uses rhetorical strategies to characterize scientific research. So now, look at the difference between effective and adequate. What's the difference between effective and adequate? Would you rather be called effective or adequate?
Effective.
Okay, so what does adequate mean? You're normal. You're average. Who wants to be average? Mediocre, right? So who wants to be average? Well, at this point, we would die to get a 6, right? So adequate's pretty good, right? So so teachers, we have a teacher training or teacher like evaluation that we do. So ours is not adequate. Our adequate means proficient. And then our 9, our effective, is exceeds expectations. So most of us as teachers, depending on who your evaluators are, don't believe in giving that top score. So we're all basically proficient. I'm like, listen, I'm way better than proficient, right? So I hate that term, just like I hate adequate. So last year, we were reading an essay in class, and from the college board, one of the comments said, in order to rise above adequacy, this student must, blah, blah, blah. I looked and I go, that should go on a shirt. And there began our shirts and our hashtag of rise above adequacy. So now you understand when I hashtag rise above adequacy, we want to be better than adequate, right? So this is where we get adequate from. Okay, so notice the difference in the descriptor of effective and adequate. I mean, adequate is good, but it's not impressive, right? Notice the writing may contain lapses in diction or syntax, not both, but generally the prose is clear. So this is a good, solid essay. All right, now so look at the 7. The 7 fits the description of a 6, so it's just the 6 plus 1, but provide a more complete explanation or more mature prose style. So again, the 7 is exactly what the 6 was, but says it better or is more depth of analysis. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's get to the 5. Okay, so let me explain this to you, because you probably don't know what tuning a radio means, and that says tanning. Tuning a radio. So back in the old days, when we didn't have radios where you push a button and it just goes, right? We had a dial, a literal dial, right? And it's not the digital dial where you can dial it to. We just had like this span of numbers, and we had to kind of guess where 106.1 was, right? So as we're going up the dial, we're going, we hear static, and then we hear the Spanish-speaking station, and we know right after the Spanish-speaking station is 106. So I have to go just a little bit further. Crap, there's the Spanish station. Let me go further a little bit more. Oh, wait, I went too far. Now there's the second Hispanic station or Spanish-speaking station. So I can go back to 106. Okay, there it is, right? So a 5 is like tuning a station. If I go too far, then I get to 106. If I don't go far enough, then I'm in the Spanish-speaking station. So sometimes I understand it, and I hear Taylor Swift. And then sometimes I hear my Zumba music, right? So I'm like, I don't know where I'm going, okay? So that's what a 5 is. Sometimes I get it. Sometimes I don't understand what's being said. That's a 5, okay? But the other thing that this has been called is the Nike score. Because you basically just do it. Notice this. Essays earning a score of 5, analyze how Barry uses rhetorical strategies. Notice there is no descriptor. There's no good, there's no impressive, they just do. Okay? Big difference. These essays may, however, provide uneven, inconsistent, or limited explanations. Thanks. So let's talk. What does it mean to have an uneven explanation? Sometimes what? Okay, so I would say some is good and some is vague. That's uneven. It's there, but it's just not great, right? It's good, it's kind of there. What about inconsistent now?
Maybe don't stay on topic.
That would be, okay, kind of. Yeah, they're inconsistent on the topic. But if we're looking at analysis again, we're saying some is good and some is wrong. Okay? Limited, what does that mean? If we have some is good and some is vague, some is good and some is wrong, limited means what?
You don't go far enough.
That you're all of it is shallow. So notice there are 3 different ways that you can. I don't have time to talk to you.
Oh, I'm not gonna be here then. My grandmother just said.
Okay. So we look at these 3 types, right? Some are good, some are vague, some are good, some are wrong, some are all shallow. So notice that's that tuning a radio station, right? I kind of get it, I kind of don't get it. I kind of see where you're going, but I don't see enough of it, right? So that's the 5, okay? So look at just between the 5 and the 9 and look at how hard it is to score. Do y'all see like how many variables there are and how hard it is to score? Yes? Know that we spend about a minute on each essay. So do you see why when there's a lack of clarity or when there's all this fluff or all these extra words, do you see why you're moving yourself down the scale? Okay, so now let's look at the fail. So look at the 4 is inadequate. Okay, so 4 inadequately analyzes how Barry uses rhetorical strategies. Okay, so now look at the difference between inadequate and adequate. Big difference, right? Big jump. Okay, so this prose generally conveys the student ideas, but may suggest immature control of writing. So what you're going to see in the 4 down is summary. Right? Most of the time from the 4 down, you're going to see summary. That's what leads you into inadequate, because if adequate or the Nike just doing it, there is some analysis there. Here, you're going to see a lot of labeling of devices. Right? Between the 4 and the 3, you're going to see labeling of devices and then summary that follows. But not much else than that. Okay? And then again, it's also immature writing. So if we were moving up the scale at a 6 plus 1, here we're going at a 4 minus 1 to get to the 3. So the 3 has everything that the 4 does, but less success in analyzing the strategies. So these weren't successful really at all. They may have pointed them out. These either pointed them out incorrectly, right? Or just kind of started putting evidence in and didn't really say anything about it. Okay? They also show less control of writing. All right, the 2, they demonstrate little success in analyzing how Barry uses rhetorical strategies. Here, with these, you're going to see where it says how. This is usually you're going to say like what. In the 4 and the 3, it's going to say what Barry used, not how he used it, if that makes sense. And we'll see it when I start scoring something else. These essays misunderstand the prompt. That happened quite a bit with Frederick Douglass, right? If you misunderstand the prompt. You failed to analyze the strategies, or you substitute a simpler task by responding to the prompt tangentially with unrelated, inaccurate, or inappropriate explanations. These are going to be really a summary of the whole passage without evidence or a lack of evidence. Okay? So the 1 is a 2 minus 1. So notice they are undeveloped, simplistic in their explanation, and or weak in their control of language. We really should never be writing a 1. Unless you are writing completely off task, you should never be writing a 1. At the very, very least, we should be writing a 3. Okay? If you run out of time, and we're talking like big picture when we do like our full-blown mock exam, if you're running out of time, I say at the very least, write a thesis statement and a chunk of analysis. That should at least get you to a 3, right? A 2 or a 3, because you're at least writing some chunk of evidence that you're showing them that you know analysis. You just don't have enough time to finish. But timing shouldn't be an issue for us in the spring. Okay, does that make sense now? Right? So know that it's not very hard to move up the scale, right? So when I score evens, 2, 4, 6, or 8. And I say, is it passing? Yes, then I start at the 6. If I say it's not even a 6, but it's passing, I stop and give it a 5. If I'm in between 2 scores and I say, God, I don't know if it's a 6 or a 7, I go 6. Because if I'm having to convince myself, apparently it wasn't strong enough. If I'm having to talk myself into a higher score. Does that make sense? I know y'all would give anything for me to talk myself into a higher score.